going. All right then. Put on my fake voice. Could never be a real broadcaster, not in a million years.
He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world. The cold, relentless circling of the intestate earth. Darkness implacable. The blind dogs of the sun in their running. The crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere 200 animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
And lo, for the earth was empty of form, and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep, and we said, look at that fucker dance.
Welcome to the Death of the Universe. We are in Seoul, South Korea. It is September 6th, 2021, 10:52 a.m. It's a Monday morning. It's a special day in America. It's Labor Day, everybody. That all-important U.S. holiday that everyone always thinks about the true meaning of whenever it comes around.
It's probably the best holiday in America because it celebrates how hard everyone works.
Yeah.
And it's a good time to go out to eat and visit people who are working on the day. And also a good time to buy some new stuff, like a graphics card or a dress, pants.
I guess I don't think of it as much of a, it's a super,
Shopping day?
Yeah.
Apparently retail sales go way up on Labor Day.
Weird. I think anything I ever did on Labor Day was just pretty typical. Usually barbecuing, cooking out.
Yeah, I guess I got drunk.
Getting drunk, yeah.
I didn't even need a holiday to do that, though.
Right. I guess I still do sometimes, but especially, I guess, throughout all of my 20s, any time, a group of friends get together on a holiday, it was just this is truly no different than any other day.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess you, try to make it seem like it's different, but, then you realize, just what you're doing is no different so much. I guess that's where the maybe grilling food outdoors would come in. That's not always an everyday thing. Anyway, so we're going to talk about labor unions, and so forth, and the holiday itself a little bit more, and how it's kind of a scam when you really think about it. But first, this news came out. Actually just a few days ago. And the whole reason actually we even decided to do this was because I noticed that a story we were going to talk about anyway, which was that the eviction moratorium was ending. Wait, no, it's already ended. I'm thinking of something else.
The unemployment program.
Scratch all that. Because several unemployment programs are expiring today. Well, you've got maybe another 13, 14 hours in the U.S., I guess, right now, as of the recording.
It looks like the pandemic unemployment assistance is going away. The federal pandemic unemployment compensation is done. The pandemic emergency unemployment compensation will also leave. We're going to leave 7.5 million workers with no employment benefits on Labor Day.
Yeah, it's just it seems like an especially cruel day to pick for all of these. I would say in some situations, probably life-saving benefits to expire.
Well, it's not such a bad day for Congress. It's hard for people to complain at you when you're off work.
Yeah, they're still on vacation, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those fucking pieces of shit. I think they actually had 8 weeks off. I think we said 6 before, but maybe I don't know. I think I heard like multiple numbers floating around. In any case, fuck those people. And fuck Joe Biden. Because this is, well, yeah, along with Congress. I mean, this is also his fault. He could write an executive order to extend these benefits.
Probably.
I mean, to my understanding,
but that would make it look like coronavirus is still a problem.
right? That's over. It's over.
That's
and
bad
done
for
with.
votes.
Man, so this is sort of an aside, but not really. So Biden gave a speech very recently, trying to say that basically like what you just said, like, oh, the coronavirus is over. It's not a problem. And his entire justification for like why we should be feeling like okay and positive about all of this shit is that we're the only country in the world to see an increase in our GDP during the pandemic, as if that means anything to anyone that's suffering.
It means everything to figures of state.
Well,
Because we live in a fucking stupid world that bases like progress on GDP.
Right.
Sorry.
I mean,
Go ahead.
it means it means everything to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and their little wannabes. I mean, they're the ones who've profited. They're the one.
The Dow keeps getting record highs. Billionaires keep profiting.
Yeah, like next time you go to a fast food restaurant and you see that cashier maybe looking a little bit down, say, "Hey, cheer up, pal, cheer up, pally. Didn't you see? Look at the Dow. Isn't your life better now?"
It is nice though of the Federal Reserve cutting all these benefits, but they're still putting $120 billion monthly into the stock market.
Yeah, it's the stock market with bootstraps.
$120 billion monthly.
They got one bootstrap over here called Federal, and the other bootstrap on the other foot called Reserve, and they pull themselves up by it every month. Yeah, it's obscene. It's terrible. There doesn't seem to be any reversing this decision either. But since I also I was sort of conflating in my mind these expirations of two very important things, I would also want to tack on here that with the expiration of the eviction moratorium, I don't recall exactly the numbers at the moment, but it's like more than 10 million people, I want to say. I think the last numbers we saw were like, if you look at individuals and not just like heads of the household or whatever, the people actually paying the rent, it's something like nearly 16 million individuals will be newly homeless.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
Those numbers were pretty recent. I remember we were reading a Branko Marcetic article about it. not that long ago. In any case, I don't think we ever talked about this on the show yet, but just to recap, I guess, make it clear, the Supreme Court is responsible. I would say partly responsible, because there's a lot of people responsible, but they're responsible for turning over the eviction moratorium. And what's perversely funny about that is that when Biden was talking about refusing to extend it, like before Cori Bush did her heroic maneuver to save the nation, Biden came out and was saying, well, there's no sense in extending it because it's not going to hold up in court. The Supreme Court's going to overturn it. Like, he's just like basically saying, like, he's just like telling the Supreme Court, like, hey, you can turn this over, right? Like, why would you fucking say that? Also, what they found I guess unconstitutional or doesn't pass the court's rigorous standards is the fact that it was the CDC who was declaring the moratorium.
Yeah.
So that means Biden could have just done it by executive order easily. But instead he came out on the national stage and said, hey, Supreme Court, you going to turn this thing over or what?
If the neoliberal party has shown us anything, they are never going to wield any power. They refuse to.
Yeah, I know. I feel like it still should be said that they could, because I think a lot of people really...
Yeah, I know they could.
But I'm saying, not for our benefit, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying like we're even doing anything important.
No, I get you.
But
other people should know, right?
Yeah.
The word needs to get out.
It should.
The leaders could do more.
And it just... I feel like if you, like, not remarking upon it is almost like, I don't know, it's like giving in to their, it's like, I'm not going to pretend to be fooled by this shit.
It's like having,
personally.
Often living in America feels like you have one party of Nazis doing fucked up shit and another party of observers just doing nothing about it.
Who, there's the old dictum, I forget where it even comes from, but there's no difference in like levels of evil between people standing by and doing nothing and people actively perpetrating evil. Although I would say in a way that like the Democrats, they want to portray themselves as the kind of like standing around helpless, we can't do anything, but I think they're more actively perpetuating this bullshit too.
Probably.
But I agree with like that is like the general dynamic of politics for probably the last 40 years, like since like the Reagan Revolution. I mean,
why wouldn't it be? It just continues to line all of their pockets.
Yeah, it's mutually beneficial. It's a mutually beneficial, like, theatrical relationship.
We are losing these moratoriums for unemployment. The unemployment and eviction ones are probably the two like most important ones as far as like helping people, and it's fucking terrible. They're going away. In December, we lose the student loan moratorium, which is bad also.
That's right.
Imagine, and that's another problem that could be solved. I don't know. Imagine just injecting $120 billion a month into every, I don't know. That fucking sucks. Why is the Federal Reserve injecting $120 billion a month into the Dow Jones? It's absurd to me.
Because, well, I mean, a lot of reasons, I guess, but mainly like one, it's like it's for show. It's to continue to show the world that we're thriving despite the pandemic, which was Biden's whole point of that stupid speech. Oh, that in that speech too, he used the phrase, "This is going to help us weather the ups and downs of the Delta virus." I was like, what are the ups of the Delta virus? You fucking moron. I mean, I guess I know what he means. Like but I mean, so far it's only. I mean, unless you consider the upward trajectory of people dying and getting sick and up, then I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But anyway, I the whole reason I brought up the people being freshly homeless is that the White House's response to this, I mean, talk about projecting helplessness, is Jen Psaki literally, and she did this, but like it's been said in other places too, but the White House's like official stance is calling upon lawyers across the land to go do volunteer work and help people not get evicted. That's their answer to the problem.
How did that work out during the housing crisis?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say this is even worse than the housing crisis.
Has the potential to be.
It's at least on par, and like, I don't know, but it's not being talked about like the way that the housing crisis was, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say, I think a lot of people still cannot wrap their head around the coronavirus and all the fallout from it. Like, even people in government, mainly because the way it kills people or hurts people is very invisible.
Sort of. But I mean, if you were actually a good politician, you'd be going around to hospitals and seeing with your own eyes like the hell state that they're in right now in almost every corner of the country. Like every day I see like a new city or an entire new state that's talking about all of their intensive care units being full. It's like, you know, this means people don't even think about the fact that this also means that like people, it's not like during the pandemic suddenly all the other health problems disappear either. Like people still have heart attacks and strokes and like need to have emergency care, and a lot of times they're literally being made to like wait, or they're being treated in the parking lot, you know. It's insane. This is the type of shit that if it was happening in another country, we would point as a sign of this is a failed state. Like this is a failed country. This is like third world shit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen multiple, like, little antidotes where people from other countries are like, isn't America embarrassed for having, like, homeless people? They're the richest country in the world. Type deal.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. Not that matters.
I just think, I don't know. I don't think politicians have any excuse. I think regular people that are struggling to stay afloat and work regular jobs, I get that they don't have time to pay attention and like scour the news, but these politicians, fuck them. They're on their 7th straight week of vacation right now. It's just it's really gross. And
well, I mean, they need to recover. They're still like suffering PSTD from earlier this year.
Sorry, just PSTD, just STD.
People
PTSD.
Yeah.
Anyway,
people broke into Congress and scared them. They need extra vacation this year. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, this is their normal vacation anyway, but
but they need extra vacation.
Yeah, they really should get it. And
maybe they should just all quit their jobs.
That's one more thing to mention though, is that where the fuck is Cory Bush now? Where the fuck is AOC? They were like, they literally said, we moved mountains. And they patted themselves so hard on the back that they fucking like spit up food. Like, they haven't said a goddamn word about this shit. Why is that? Why aren't they protesting now? They could be drawing attention to this. because it's just not advantageous for them at now. Cori Bush already got her $100,000 book advance right after she did that shit. So she's good. She's all good. She's on vacation. Got a new $100,000 to write a book about her hard knock life before she became a fucking rich congressperson. But anyway, I guess we should probably move on. I wanted to. I mean, never forget they ended all the benefits for 7.5 billion people on Labor Day, and the White House is asking lawyers to work for free to help the 16 million people that they could have stopped from being kicked out of their houses. So
Never forget that this was the most progressive legislation since the New Deal.
oh my God. Yeah, that was in that Biden speech too. He was like, the reason we have all this money is because of my Save America Restoration America Act. It's like, no, you have it because the Federal Reserve is just shoveling money into Wall Street. And again, GDP is not a sign of the prosperousness of a country.
That's what the whole world bases it on, though, which is... I don't think anything... this is not what we're talking about today, but it probably should talk about it. But I often think that nothing can get better in the world until we stop using GDP as a metric, and that's basically what the whole world uses, is like the metric of success.
Yeah, but a lot of people know that it's faulty, and there people do studies that take more into account than that to describe like But
I'm talking about states. Most states in the world, it's like their metric, from what I understand. Like U.S. government, basically every government. I don't know.
I understand that, but there are like social scientists that factor in all these other things, and I forget who does it. I want to say it's some international organization like does like an index every year of like and ranks like each country in terms of like overall quality of life, and it integrates like a lot of factors, including even like subjective like happiness surveys, but it also looks at like wealth inequality. It looks at like infant mortality rates. It looks at just overall health. It looks at the healthcare system. It looks at infrastructure, everything. And when you put America on that list, we're far from number one. But anyway, I mean, I agree. I wish people would stop talking about things in those terms, but I do feel like more people, at least than in the past, see through that. Like they see Biden's speech and they're like, that doesn't mean shit. My life isn't any better. My neighbor's life isn't any better. Like they know better. They know that it's the sum total like wealth of the nation, which when you have like 4 billionaires that own 50% of the wealth, like obviously that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but I guess all I meant was, I think the main focus of at least the United States, and I think many countries, is to make sure that their output is always increasing and the economy is always getting stronger. And there isn't a focus on welfare of the citizens. And while I think more and more people are realizing that, how can it ever break through into policy if we just keep choosing Democrats or Republicans with neoliberal ideals? It just seems like it's not going to happen. I don't know.
I'm saying that's in a huge way, it's an American problem, especially because we're number one. That's like one of the only things we're number one in that's even remotely positive. I don't think Sweden or whatever is like oh, we must raise the GDP at all costs. Like, fuck the citizenry. Like, no, like people have a standard of life in Europe, and especially in, say, the Nordic countries and the Scandinavian countries, that it just puts ours to shame. I mean, and I know you know that, everybody knows that. But,
I know that.
But like, so I'm saying like, this is mostly an American problem about just like trying to big dick their way around with like pure sum total numbers, like whatever the GDP is. It's a problem. I totally agree. It pisses me off to no end. That's why I wanted to like, throw my phone out the window when Joe Biden kept saying we're the only country to increase GDP during this pandemic, and not mentioning anything else going on. So yeah, there's that. There's all that. But labor. Oh, labor.
What's that? What's labor?
Well, I guess we should say that we're mostly going to be talking about the history of examples of labor movements in the U.S. We don't have enough time even to go over internationally. Although, like, I do want to look at some of the comparative numbers of like membership percentage and things like that compared to other countries. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Well, we've got this article here, 30 victories for workers' rights won by organized labor over the years. And when I was going through this, one thing I started to notice was after a certain point, about maybe roughly halfway through, it just starts to get more and more depressing, even though these are supposed to be like all wins. I mean, the thing it finally ends on with Obama is just like almost like a nothing comparatively. But this article's trying to be positive.
I mean, yeah, it's a small one. I mean, it's good that it passed. It's not a bad thing, but the ones near the beginning are much bigger as far as helping people. I agree.
First labor union in the United States was formed in 1794, and they were a group of shoemakers, cobblers as they might have been called. And yeah, they demanded higher wages, like by banding together and demanding them. And
it's also significant because they were the first like tradespeople that organized protection against scabs, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
I always worry.
But they were also the first organized tradespeople in the U.S. Or they, yeah.
So a court ruled in 1806 that the shoemakers and their protest was a criminal act, a criminal conspiracy to try to organize for higher wages that they don't deserve. And they were defeated, the laborers. And then like 3 decades later in 1842, a high court in Mass overturned the precedent in Commonwealth versus Hunt, which declared the workers that workers do in fact have a right to organize and strike. But the 1806 like ruling said that workers do not have a right to organize and strike for higher wages. So the important thing, the victory came nearly 50 years later, 40 years later.
Yeah, it doesn't really mention
48 years later.
It doesn't really mention if these shoemakers actually ever even got higher wages. It's just their significance is that it led to a court case saying that, well, as the state of Massachusetts, this wasn't even federal, but still it created a precedent, legal precedent, saying that yes, workers have the right to organize and strike and demand and make demands. Then there was a national labor union created in 1866, just literally called the National Labor Union. I guess this was brought on by the end of slavery. Yeah, I guess people, for some reason, felt more entitled to pursue better lives after, I don't know, the horrors of war. And yeah, and I don't know how much like newly freed slaves had to do with it. I can't imagine that black people were even allowed in this group at that time, but this this sort of listicle doesn't really say.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But I'm almost positive they weren't. And also they dissolved this group 7 years later.
Because of corporate anti-labor campaigns that helped sour much of America on the movement.
Yes, so you could maybe say this is the beginning of like a public campaign to turn the masses against the idea of labor unions. Then another point of interest was that they had there was the first Labor Day parade in New York City, 1882, and this is what began the holiday we still celebrate today. And so this is seen as significant just because it gave some positive, put some positive optics on labor unions, and I guess sort of shifted public opinion. This one then, skipping ahead to the 20th century, 1911. I think a lot of people might at least recognize the name of this incident. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, there was a huge fire there that killed everyone inside. Mostly
women, right? 146 people, mostly women. It was a sweatshop. They were
like the conditions were so bad that like fire escapes were blocked. There was a lot of highly flammable material that people, protesters previously, like 2 years ago, had warned about being dangerous. So I mean, this was not a victory. This was a tragedy, but it was like a sort of turning point for creating public outrage and again probably making the notion of labor unions more sympathetic.
Yeah. It gave people something to rally around, because before I think a lot of labor unions were kind of like at each other's throats a lot because they wanted different things.
Yeah, and
which kind of happens in a lot of movements.
I think also, I mean, like in the beginning of this, you know, that judge told the cobbler guild or whatever to fuck off because he's like, demanding higher wages, that's a goddamn criminal conspiracy. And like that's the way a lot of people still feel even today, is like, oh, those labor unions, they just always want to squeeze more and more money out of you. That's all they're interested in.
They're just racketeers.
But when you look at like a fire that like horribly killed 146 people, and like those people, all they're demanding is like, don't block the fire escape and like don't make us work with this flammable material, you know. And I'm not saying that's all they're asking for, but that's a more like concrete, sort of tangible thing that maybe doesn't strike someone, I don't know, living across the country who's has their own struggles and isn't in a union. Because that's I feel like a lot of anti-labor stuff comes down to is like, well, I don't have a fucking union, and like, and it's just like it becomes like sheer like jealousy and resentment, something like that. I think. I mean, you hear that a lot today. Like, I mean, I've probably felt something similar to that, except I understood the good of labor unions, so I wasn't resentful. I was just jealous. I was like, oh man, like Like even sometimes when I think about the Screen Actors Guild or what is it, the Writers Guild of America, WGA, like they actually have pretty good benefits and stuff, and like there's unemployment benefits, and like that's just if you're like a screenwriter. And like sometimes I hear about like those people like getting good health insurance and stuff, and in times when I had no health insurance and was making like, you know, maybe just above minimum wage, I would get like, it would be like, yeah, I mean, I understand the feeling, but like I shouldn't want to take it away from them to bring them down to my level. It obviously should be the other way around. We're like, okay, well then I need to like maybe try to create my own union, like even as hard as that would be, or just even get into a line of work that has good unions. But
Yeah. But there's a lot of manipulation and influence from, I don't know, the corporates, the capitalists, whatever you want to call them, to make people want to infight and increase jealousy among people, because it helps keep people down.
yeah, for sure. There's also just like we're in a really sorry state union wise, and have been since like 1935. Things have just
That's
like
true.
been going down from there basically. And yeah, we'll get to that, more of that later, more of the overview of US like national unions and stuff. But our fattest president in William Howard Taft, he in 1913 created the Department of Labor. So good on him. You know, they got a picture of him here, and I was thinking, yeah, he's a big guy, but he's like half the size of Chris Christie.
Yeah. At least in the picture.
Yeah, in that picture. I mean, there's all the funny stories about him, like
Getting stuck in the bathtub.
well, yeah, which is not true, but apparently he did have a custom-made bathtub that he had, that he carried, like had moved from like different residences in, and then eventually into the White House when he became president. Anyway, that's good, I guess. I mean, the Department of Labor seems like a good idea in theory. I think right now it's pretty ineffective. But actually, that's something I probably need to look into more. Otherwise, I'm just totally talking out of my ass.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure what all the Department of Labor does. That's something I should look into more too. The next big thing was like 1916 when the Keating-Owen Act was passed, which is the one that started to help curtail child labor. Because at the turn of the 20th century, 2 million children were like laboring on farms, city streets, mills, mines, factories, and stores, etc. And this act limited the number of hours children could work and prohibited interstate sale of merchandise produced by child labor. However, the Supreme Court ruled the act unconstitutional just 9 months later, so children could go back to work.
Yeah.
But eventually we did get the National Child Labor Committee, right?
Yeah. Now there are fairly strict laws about child labor.
I think we should send children back to work.
Although those laws don't really apply to migrant children working in fields and whatnot, which is something that does exist in the United States, and government agencies turn a blind eye or are bought off because, you know, if you think you can rip off just some regular adult migrant and get a cheap price on their labor, just think about what you can do to a migrant child. But yeah, I guess maybe like field work is probably not something that children are put into as much. It's more the sweatshop stuff and the factory things, which is also horrible. I'm not really comparing them. I'm just thinking out loud here.
First job I ever did was when I was 14, and it was working on a tobacco field, picking tobacco.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty common in my area, though.
That sounds like the most rural thing you've ever told me about your life.
Lots of people pick tobacco when they're teenagers. Young teenagers.
I think it just the idea of a tobacco field is so novel to me still, because I'm a damn Yankee. We don't really have those up there.
It's a shame, really.
What does it smell like? I have no idea. Does it smell like tobacco?
Yeah.
Like processed tobacco?
No, because it doesn't smell toasted.
Okay.
The way processed tobacco does.
Did it make you want to smoke?
I don't know. I grew up in a house with smokers. Maybe that made me want to smoke. Let's see.
Before we go on to the next thing, there was a pretty important and non-positive development in unionized labor called the Ludlow massacre, which happened in 1914. So I guess right before we tried to save the children and failed. See, that's one of those there that I don't really see. I guess it's a positive development because it at least like introduced the idea of putting like regulations on child labor, even though it ultimately failed. But this Ludlow massacre was, I mean, as you can tell from the name, it was just a mass murder carried out by an anti-striker militia during the Colorado Coalfield War. So there were workers from the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company living in a tent colony. If you've listened to all of our episodes, you may remember we talked about the what the fuck was it called?
I'm not sure.
The tent city in front of the White House, basically. Smedley Butler, they drove tanks over people. They burned down their tent city.
Oh, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The bonus army. The bonus army.
The bonus army, right. The bonus army.
So sort of similarly to the bonus army, these workers just like refused to move and built a tent city. And the Colorado National Guard and other private soldiers, basically hired by the company that was being, I guess, protested or having a strike taking place within it. Yeah, they just like attacked them like it was a fucking. It was not even like warfare because they just like I think these people could barely defend themselves, so it was just. Again, a massacre. And Howard Zinn, the historian, who, I don't know, he's pretty famous. Most people know. He wrote the People's History of the United States. He described this event as the culminating act of perhaps the most violent struggle between corporate power and laboring men in American history. So, pretty significant. And
sounds awful and significant, but because they massacred women and children in this too.
Yeah, it wasn't even just the workers, because they had their families living with them in this tent city. Let's see. So their demands were these. They wanted recognition of the union as a bargaining agent, so they wanted like collective bargaining rights. 2, they wanted compensation for digging coal at a ton rate based on 2,000 pounds. Previous ton rates were of long tons of 2,200 pounds. that doesn't even seem significantly different to me. It's like that doesn't sound like they're asking for much. 3, they wanted enforcement of the 8-hour workday, which was already a law by this point, I believe, and it just wasn't being enforced. 4, they wanted payment for, quote, dead work. Dead work include things like laying track, timbering, handling impurities, etc. So laying down track for, I presume, the what would you even call those?
Railroad mine carts.
Yeah, like the carts that like collect coal, I'm assuming.
Mine carts.
Yeah. Timbering, so like fucking chopping down trees and doing whatever they need to use the wood for with them. And handling impurities, I don't even know exactly what that means, but it doesn't sound...
It means cleaning. So all of this is just like busy work when they're not actually working on what they were hired to do. This is the work that their manager gave them.
Well, it sounds like laying track is like an essential part of their mining job, though. I mean, I guess they could have separate laborers to do that. I mean, you think?
Yeah, I think this is more of like the miners were there to mine, and that wasn't their job. But when they're not like nothing to mine, they were put to other work. That's why it's like dead work.
And they weren't being paid, which is insane. 5, weight checkmen elected by the workers. So they wanted the people checking the weight of the coal to be elected by the workers, and not some upper level management type coming in and like trying to rip them off, because they're getting paid obviously by like the tonnage. 6, right to use any store and to choose their boarding houses and doctors. So this this presumes they were living in like one of those towns that we've talked about before, where like
factory town.
Yeah, like the mining towns that like still exist today, right? I mean, to some degree.
Yeah.
So they were like they weren't allowed to like put their money into like any outside economy outside of the enclosed mining town, it seems like, including even like which doctors they would go to. And lastly, they wanted strict enforcement of Colorado's laws, such as mine safety rules, abolition of scrip. I don't know what that means.
Scrip is payment.
It's
they wanted to actually be paid, right?
It's substitution for money. It's like credit.
Yeah.
And an end to the company guard system. So not a single one of those sounds greedy to me. In fact, they sound almost like, I mean, they weren't even asking for pay raise, really, other than I guess the change of like the ton rate.
They were mainly just asking to be treated honestly.
Well, they were asking for them to follow the fucking laws of the land too.
Yeah,
there were already laws in place that they just wanted enforced, you know. So instead, they got killed. So yeah. And so then back to the initial list. There's another significant miners' struggle.
This happened near where I grew up.
Why don't you tell us about it?
It's the Blair Mountain strikes. Is where the term that redneck came from, which is turned into something else now. But it was basically West Virginia coal miners rose up against mining companies and basically had like the largest labor uprising in history. And the reason they ended up becoming rednecks or being called rednecks is because they tied red bananas around their necks to show like unity. And the miners ended up like facing off against basically scab workers, law enforcement, and military. And the workers had like heavy machine guns somehow. And I think it ended up being the only aerial bombardment of American civilians in history, but the workers had shot off something like 1 million rounds of ammunition from their machine guns. 100 people died. But this actually kind of led to a victory because it did lead to like improved conditions and, more importantly, a larger voice during FDR's future New Deal negotiations.
Yeah, I believe this is the event that song, Which Side Are You On? I want to say that's what this was written about.
I think so too.
Yeah, this was obviously a very significant pushback. I mean, it's not like there wasn't tragedy involved, but I guess, yeah, you can see this as kind of a win of like the miners weren't going to just like lay down and take it, I guess. It's one way to see it, I guess. I guess I just don't know enough about it, but I mean, it says, yeah, that led to some improvement in conditions immediately, but it's just not much more specific than that.
It's not like the Ludlow incident, only the workers won this time.
Yeah, they weren't massacred. Another significant event along the way was the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters is formed. And so after the Civil War, there were like, I guess some of these people might have been newly freed slaves, but mostly the people who worked in these as porters on the train were African American, and it says here that the position was considered prestigious in the African American community, but the reality was grueling work, long hours, low pay, and daily indignities and mistreatment. But
the service industry hasn't really changed.
In 1925, these guys formed a union, and it was the significance, I guess, historical significance, is that this was the first black labor union. Well, rather, first black labor union in history to force a powerful corporation to the negotiating table. So it's seen as a win for labor rights and civil rights. Although, again, this doesn't really tell us like the outcome. I imagine when they don't give the full outcome that it means it probably wasn't that great. But they are just talking about, this was a win because it was like historically significant, even if maybe they didn't get their demands met. But it was seen as a win in itself just to even get the company to sit down and to remotely take you seriously, which it looks like they did.
31 Davis-Bacon Act regulates wages. I think this is kind of like the start of minimum wage.
Yeah, this is like the fetal version of the zygote of minimum wage. So the idea was it required private companies or contractors rather
to pay the current wages, like to kind of meet wages of other companies, not to like lowball all the time.
Yeah, they generally had to correspond with like union wages. It says that this standard now covers 1 in 5, which is not a lot, construction projects and 1 in 4 construction workers at any given time. It seems kind of outdated to be continued to this day.
I think it has to, we need it still because a lot of, construction companies and especially, factories and industrial companies use contracted workers because they can generally pay them less. I mean, if nothing else, they save money because they don't have to provide the benefits, etc.
Yeah.
So, kind of forces them to make sure they get somewhat of an equal wage. Which doesn't always work out.
Don't completely rip people off. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is of course, I'm a pretty firm believer in labor unions, but like, it's like sometimes when you look at like these historical events and you think about like the power that unions can theoretically have, and then you look at like compare that with reality, it's a bit of a bummer, because it seems like, I mean, that's why you also need like a strong like federal and or at least like state level regulatory agencies like enforcing this shit, because I think there are a lot of small unions. I mean, like if you're in like one of the large national ones, you know, you're probably gonna have your basic rights respected for the most part, and if people don't, you have this big apparatus you can like turn to for help. but
Yeah.
like there are tons of like tiny unions as well that don't have that kind of power, that don't get to like sit down with like Congress people or whatever, or like, you know, don't work in tandem with the Democratic Party like all the major unions do now, which is why they basically suck. But really, I mean, like the major national unions in America are like,
Oh, I know.
they just completely have sold out like everybody. I shouldn't say completely, but just compared to I don't know, the sort of, if there's any brief golden age of unions, we're approaching it here in the timeline, but it didn't last very long, I would say, either. Okay, this figure is important. Frances Perkins. She what was her position under FDR?
Presidential cabinet, right? She was a cabinet member.
Yeah, but what, I mean, that could be anything. I'm saying, like, what's her job?
She made cabinets.
God damn it. Was she the, what did it say? What the fuck Secretary of Labor. That's what I thought.
33 to 45.
So she made history because she was the first woman to even be in a presidential cabinet, period. FDR hired her in 33. Yeah, to be appointed her, rather, the Secretary of Labor. And she was a true believer in the cause. She actually was like, she was sort of spurred to action by having watched in person the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And it details a part of that incident here. She says that she watched helplessly as 47 workers, mostly young women, made the agonizing choice to jump to their deaths instead of burning alive. She later called the catastrophe, quote, "the day the New Deal was born." Yeah, just sitting and thinking for like a minute about what you would do in that situation, like it's just, yeah, obviously agonizing to imagine. So she made a lot of leaps forward, though, for like labor movements in general, like at least in terms of, I guess she was like a major part of she was a major part of writing up the New Deal, like, yeah, in general, and
she helped like organize all these ideals that a lot of different labor unions had throughout the first part of the 20th century and get it put into the New Deal. That's my understanding.
Yeah, they write it strangely. Like, why don't they just fucking say that? Because it sounds like it could be like, oh, these were my priorities. Anyway, it's like she standardized, at least, if not actually got it implemented, the 40-hour work week, minimum wage, unemployment compensation, workers' compensation, abolition of child labor, direct federal aid to the states for unemployment relief, Social Security, big one there, a revitalized federal employment service, and universal health insurance. See, that's why I'm thinking these were like ideals. There was never universal health insurance. ever. But all those other things did come to pass. That's true. In any case, she's an important figure in improving labor.
It's my understanding they wanted health insurance as part of the New Deal. I mean, that's like where the what do old people get in America? Medicare, because that came out of the New Deal, right? And
No,
I think
that's later.
I was thinking that there was something with FDR where he wanted to get it, but they couldn't get it.
There is. He called it the Bill of Human Rights, which was just an idea that never came to pass. Yeah, it was that everyone would get health care, food, like just basic needs, essentially. But yeah, one of the big standouts on that list is universal health care, but obviously that's yet to ever come to pass in the U.S. Now, I think Medicare was Johnson, I want to say. That was like in the 60s. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like...
I'm just getting my history confused.
No, it's like a relatively, like... You would think that that's an older thing, but I just remember when I realized it, I'm pretty sure it came about in the 60s. I think the reason I even know that is because Bernie Sanders has probably said it like it's been working great ever since 1964 or whatever. Anyway, fact check us on that, listeners. Okay, another big one, really considered probably one of the most important strikes in the 20th century is when the auto workers, the United Auto Workers Union, they were striking against GM. And I think that one of the things that was really important about this was their methods. They didn't just stand outside and like wave signs. They stayed inside, blocking like the machinery so that replacement...
No one could do the work, right?
Yeah. And like I heard someone describe this the other day, and I think they were probably just kind of talking off the top of their head, but they kind of mischaracterized how smoothly this whole thing went. They were kind of like, yeah, it was great. Like they sat on the ground and they couldn't send in the National Guard or anything because FDR was in power and FDR wasn't having any of it. But that's not quite it. No, like people shot at them, the police and I think the National Guard too. But there was some sense that FDR basically refused to support
GM
by sending in like the National Guard, but it looks like the National Guard was there. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of it right now. In any case, the president basically told GM just to like shut up and like negotiate so they could reopen the plant, like stop all this nonsense. And ultimately they got what they wanted. I mean, they negotiated, so they probably didn't get everything they wanted, but
they got some of it.
Yeah. But yeah, at certain points it got pretty violent. It said that like these guys weren't armed, the guys on strike, but it said they were like throwing like bottles and rocks and shit at these people who had guns. There's one picture I like of a guy. He's like sleeping on the because it's a car factory, so there's just like the seats for a car just like sitting there, and he's just asleep on them. Like, yep, this is mine now. This is where I work. I don't know. I just kind of like that idea, but I would say this is one of the high points in proactive labor striking.
Yeah, it looks like the workers ended up getting like a 5% increase in pay and were allowed to talk about the union during lunch.
Yay! You're allowed to talk about the union.
But 100,000 people ended up signing up for the union, which made it maybe the most powerful union of the time. And
The other real bummer, because, you can't just look at these positive stories without thinking about the negative side, is that this was in Flint, Michigan. And, well,
We all know what happened there.
look at Flint, Michigan now.
Obama drank some water there.
Yeah.
Lots of people have drank water there to varying results, come to think of it.
So the crowning achievement of the American Union movement was in 1938 when FDR signed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which guaranteed a minimum wage. So this was like the first time we had a guaranteed federal minimum wage. It guaranteed that, an 8-hour workday, 40-hour work week, and time and a half for overtime. It also barred people under 18 from like various kind of hazardous work conditions. It prevented children from under 16 from working in mines or manufacturing or in any job during school hours. I mean, these really are things that we take for granted, I guess, today. That's why I'm
definitely
kind of chuckling when I'm reading it, because it just seems so
normal,
standard,
so expected.
But yeah, this was a big fucking deal, to quote Joe Biden. As when did he say that? That was when they signed the ACA. He whispered that to Obama. This is a big fucking deal, man. What a dumb shit. And yeah, so this was kind of like the beginning of the modern era of the labor union. I think we probably got to like get flying through this.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to cover in this. We could just move on to the other stuff.
Yeah, there's like various acts signed. I mean, maybe the biggest thing to mention is the Civil Rights Act, because that also had labor implications. It also mentions that Martin Luther King Jr., he was supporting a labor strike by sanitation workers in Memphis when he was killed by the FBI. By the FBI is my editorial there.
Yeah. I thought it was the CIA.
So, I mean, another thing we should mention is that at this point in the timeline, union membership is just going to, with like very small, tiny exceptions in certain years, it's only going to continue going down.
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more states start to like get rid of unions as much as they can. At least all my southern states.
And I think a lot of like the same like kind of intimidation tactics that are still used today were being used, like intimidating workers and who are like even thinking about starting a union or joining a union, things like that. But like, yeah, a couple of things that happen between the Civil Rights Act and today. They're all basically things about like discrimination in hiring practices. So like Johnson made it so you couldn't discriminate based on age. I mean, obviously the child labor stuff still stands. So I mean, but anyway, you know what I mean. Nixon forms OSHA, which is, Occupational Safety and Health Act. That's important, even though people get around it a lot.
That's also true. You got some equal pay stuff going on, which has discrimination, and there was the Disabilities Act that Bush signed, which I think was actually pretty big.
Yeah, that's important. I guess that was an amendment to the Civil Rights Act. It included workers with disabilities that could not be. And now this Clinton one is funny. So he signed the Family and Medical Leave Act, and I guess you could say it's better than nothing, but it basically said that all employers have to allow their workers to take off 12 job-protected work weeks in a year for things like birth or adoption or serious illness or to care for a seriously ill child or spouse. Unlike in most wealthy Western countries, however, the act does not mandate paid maternity or paternity leave, which means the time off is guaranteed but not compensated. Great. Better than nothing, I suppose, if you can afford to not work for 12 weeks and not get paid, but most people can't. And then, Obama signed this thing that sort of helped extend the Fair Pay Act, which we skipped over, which was Kennedy signed, which was meant to make equal pay for equal work between men and women. And Obama signed this act that basically allowed women to sue over that kind of discrimination. Like, I guess previously there was like a time limit that was really unfair, basically. And after this has been signed, it basically helps people out who are being mistreated in a way. But like I said, like I feel like this, as membership decreases, so do the big like moments in positive like changes with unions. But
yeah, I just think it's became harder and harder to actually find jobs where there are a union.
Yeah,
almost like it was engineered that way.
Like as of right now, 10% of workers in the U.S., I believe it's 10. It might even be less because the most recent year I have is 2016. It was 10% still. I think it's even less now. But that's pretty low. If you look at a chart of like all countries, we're like, I wish there were numbers on it. They're not, but it looks like we could be like 50th on the list or something.
Sure.
Iceland is number 1 and has been number 1 for a long time. They're a little over 90%. Cuba is a little over 80, then Denmark. Then it drops down a little bit. Denmark is 67. Basically, it's all the countries you would expect. Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, Finland, Norway. Those are all in the top 10.
Cuba.
Kazakhstan, I mean, is it weird that I'm surprised by that? But they're in the top 10, it looks like. But yeah, and I think I'm not going to be able to find it now, but I think the highest percentage we had in history was like 40 something, and that was in like 1935. Don't 100% quote me on this, but it's just been like decreasing, like I said, steadily decreasing. But why don't we celebrate May Day, Jason?
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about how Labor Day is a scam. So May Day was established after police opened fire on laborers on May 4th in 1886. These laborers were demanding an 8-hour workday in America before that was established. So, but for some reason, even here in Korea we celebrate Labor Day, and it became a global holiday. I mean, May Day, real Labor Day.
Yeah.
But we don't in America. Somehow we celebrate September 5th, which is actually engineered to be that way. So, kind of what happened was...
I think it's just the first Monday in September, so it changes.
Yeah, first Monday in September. You're right. What happened was there's actually a lot of riots and stuff that would happen on May Day, even in the States and globally. Like there was a big one in the Soviet Union, etc. And a lot of like bankers and industrialists in America wanted to get rid of May Day. So the first thing they did was the Catholic Church tried to rebrand it as St. Joseph's Day, and Joseph was kind of like the guy who just did whatever in the Bible, just accepted his fate. That didn't really work. And then later, the American government rebranded May Day as Law and Order Day, which magically basically just killed the day because who the fuck cares about law and order?
Law and Order Day.
Yeah, it became Law and Order Day. And even more recently, it's became May the Force Be With You Day.
Well,
which Disney made. But
well, I'm sorry, but well, May Day is May 1st, but May the 4th was used May 4th, obviously. But that's that May 4th is the actual day of the Chicago Haymarket massacre. As now instead of remembering the massacre of Unionists in Chicago, I mean that was a pretty bad one as well. I mean, I gotta say, I have a list of like strike breaking and massacres, and it seems to be a bit more numerous than like all of those highlights we went through. But anyway, it's just it is fucked up that now we celebrate like a commercial holiday that's meant to like sell Star Wars toys and shit. But
and like our current Labor Day is actually one of the most like major retail sales weekends. It's right up there with like Black Friday or the day after Christmas sales. And, that means like 70% of retail workers definitely work on Labor Day because they're not full-time employees, so they don't get the benefit of having holidays off. And more throughout, like, as labor goes away, less and less people even have full-time jobs. So, we're all in the service industry. We're all working on Labor Day. And the Labor Day we do have is kind of just turned into a day for consumerism and a day off. Like we were both saying at the beginning that I really used to think Labor Day was just like a nice day to let everyone have some free time.
Yeah.
But like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and like it is weird to like remember back to like early childhood and just like I was saying like our teachers like never taught us like what is Labor Day. Like, of course we probably learned everything else. Like we probably learned what Flag Day was and shit. But like, and then maybe at a certain age, like it's too heady of a concept for you. I get that. Like,
sure,
you're not gonna be like, hey, kindergartners, let's learn about labor laws. But like when say you hit like, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, you could understand it. But we're not taught this shit. And I'm not saying it's like an evil conspiracy. It's just like,
it's just not something that's brought up.
Yeah. And like, I think once I realized that like labor meant work, I was like, oh, so it's like we're getting rewarded for hard work. For working
I had
all the
no
time.
clue what May Day was until like I was much older. I actually thought May Day had something to do with like World War I or II until I was like an adult and had actually like, done some of my own reading.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I just think of like that's what people would call out when like their fucking airplane was crashing into the ocean.
But there was like a concentrated effort from industrials in America to like kind of erase May Day from America.
Yeah, they said it was communistic and stuff, even though it started in,
Chicago.
Capitalistic Chicago.
Yeah, and it just had like, unlike current Labor Day, it had a much more like, I want to say, protest vibe to it that they wanted to stamp out.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it was initially like, let's all get drunk and eat fucking hamburgers outside or whatever. I'm just guessing. Maybe that was that.
Exactly.
Maybe that was after a long day of throwing Molotov cocktails at your boss's window. Then you get to go home and chill. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Keep going.
No, I mean, That's pretty much the gist of it, is that we have this Labor Day that most Americans don't even get to celebrate, because most Americans are working service industry jobs, being denied benefits because they're not actually being offered a full-time job. So maybe they're working full-time hours because they're at 2 or, heavens forbid, 3 jobs, but they're working all these holidays. And we're celebrating labor and like all the benefits we got for doing full-time work, while actually not getting any of the benefits because we're no longer able to find full-time employment to make ends meet. And it's kind of just fucked up. That's all I wanted to say about it.
How about I really like the last paragraph of this article you found. I'll just read it and then we can do recommendations and go, or just go if you need to go.
No, that sounds good.
Okay. So this person ends their article about Labor Day being a scam, about all these things Jason just told us about.
I didn't read from the article, but I basically said what Ken Lane said in his article, only shortened it a bit. So paraphrased.
Ken Lane writes, the next mass movement, if it ever happens, will not be about increasingly scarce laborers, but about people in general. Nationalism, OxyContin, despair, television, alcohol, and slob propaganda have all done a very good job of keeping the 80% of Americans who are, quote, financially insecure, too worn down and miserable to realize they've got a common enemy. If they ever do figure this out, there will either be a long internal war, the class war that worries rich liberals and rich conservatives alike, or the Pentagon is just going to poison the whole country between Silicon Valley and Manhattan. Enjoy the barbecue! And scene. That's the end.
I wish I had a barbecue to enjoy.
Yeah, I didn't even think about, like, we should have fucking celebrated May Day. I gotta start getting in. I gotta start doing that. I know
I was off work. We get that. That's a red day in Korea.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
I mean, it's celebrated everywhere in the world, but where it originated.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially celebrated in like socialist or socialist-leaning places. I'm actually kind of surprised that they haven't stomped it out in Korea yet, to be honest.
Korea still has like a very strong like union system.
They do, but like, there's a lot. I mean, you know, the fucking chaebol thing. Like they
oh yeah, I know.
They crush unions too. But recommendations. I don't have one yet in my head. I'm sorry. Do you have one?
I love brand new cherry flavor, which I finally got around to finishing, which is a Netflix series, I guess, about a young woman who moves to LA after making this like fairly successful student film, and she's trying to make a feature length of it, but, you know, she has to, like, you know, get in with studio producers, etc. And basically a producer, a male established producer, steals her film after having her sign some contracts and stuff, and it's about her seeking revenge against this producer who stole, like, her art. And it's fucking great. It's gross. It's like a mixture of David Lynch and David Cronenberg mixed with who's the guy that directed Mandy? Oh, I always forget his name. Black Rainbow guy.
He has like a hard to remember Greek name, but yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to all of them. Very similar to like his name is Cosmatos, Panos Cosmatos movie. But right. Yeah, I highly recommend brand new cherry flavor on Netflix. It's one of the coolest shows I've watched in a long time. It's dark. There's a lot of gross scenes of puking up cats, which is interesting. First time I've really seen it in a very any media where a very common theme of it is to puke up cats. But yes, that's what I got from it. It's all about puking up cats. No, it's really about what it's like to have your work or your art taken by someone way more powerful than you, and how crushing that is.
Yeah,
and puking cats.
I think part of the reason I sort of put it off a few times was because it did look sort of too gross for my feeling at the moment. But I plan to check it out eventually. All right. I think I have a deja vu feeling, but whatever. If I've recommended this, I'm recommending it again. I'll recommend a movie called Human Nature. It's from 2001. It's a comedy drama, a dramedy, written by Charlie Kaufman. Yes, podcast favorite, Charlie Kaufman. Personal favorite here, Charlie Kaufman. And directed by Michel Gondry. They also worked together much more famously on Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. But this was before that. And this movie, I think it's like unfairly forgotten. And I think it was like a commercial bomb. Like it lost like $7 million out of a $8.6 million budget.
Jeez.
But I think it's great. I've watched it numerous times, as I have with all Charlie Kaufman movies, because I think they're very rewatchable. And it's basically about, let's see, Tim Robbins is one of the main characters. He's like a scientist doing like behavioral work with mice, trying to teach mice table manners. And through some weird confluence of events, this like feral human from the woods like comes into his like possession, and he's like, "Oh, this is perfect. I can like teach this man like literally like raised in the wild like an ape. I can like teach him. I can civilize him, you know."
Yeah, sure.
And it's got just a lot of like goofy, surreal, weird, fucked up Charlie Kaufman elements to it, and it's really funny, but it's also, you know, kind of touching and dramatic in some ways too. But also, let's see, Patricia Arquette is one of the other main characters. Yeah, it just has a lot of like interesting ideas about like civilization and like is nature better for us than like living in like, you know, cities and whatnot, and just a lot of interesting, funny shit going on throughout the whole thing. Strong recommendation, especially since I think most people haven't heard of this movie, even though Charlie Kaufman is, and it's got like, Tim Robbins is a huge actor, and Michel Gondry is well liked and stuff. But I feel like a lot of people have not seen this movie, so
I still haven't seen it.
I'll
watch it.
Highly recommended. Yes. All right.
Then.
I guess that's it.
Find us on the internet.
Yes, just type in internet in your internet search bar, and we'll be there.
HeatDeathPod.com.
Twitter at HeatDeathPod.
Leave us a review if you like us, you know, on your podcasting app. That'd be cool.
Drop us a DM on the Twitter. Send us an email. We'll read your stuff on the internet. On the internet.
Alrighty then.
All right. See you till next time.
Till next time.
That's a sentence.
It's it. It's a words.
It's a words. Bye bye.
The first voice recording was made in 1860. It was a 10-second fragment of the French folk song Au clair de la lune recorded by inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. But who will make the final voice recording and when? What will it be? Who will hear it?